Good evening and welcome to this year. Thank you for joining us. So, Parshas Tazria. Let's go straight to our first question. One of our youngest listeners asked a question. She's saying, little girl, about 5 years old, and she was saying Tilam al Shabbos Mevorchim, and came across the word Tiroyim b'shevet barzel. And so she asks her Tati, Shevet Barzel, she knows a Shevet Reuven, Shevet Shimon, what's Shevet Barzel? So Tati tells her to ask Zaidi. So here's the question. So the question is a very interesting one. Why are the tribes called Shevet? How does the word Shevet, which means a rod, what's it got to do with a
call from 073682000.
Hence the question. So here we go. So I looked up the Sefer. There's a Sefer which I have on the screen called Sefer Aruch HaSholem. So he has in the word Shevet, he translated, I guess in German, ranking. Like imagine like you have in this, what I told her already when she asked the question, you have the word ruler, which ruler can mean a stick which you measure with, and ruler can mean a king. And the king would use a stick like the scepter in a way of expression of his Minion of Melucha. So that's one level, one way of explaining the idea of a shevet being an of leadership. But it could also mean shevet can mean like a branch, but it doesn't really fit so well because shevet, and for that matter, the word matir also doesn't. They seem to be something rigid, whereas a branch seems to be more flexible. But imagine the idea of ranks, rows. You've got lots of people and they're standing in rows. That's where the word rank comes from, in rows. So then that's where the idea of the Klal Yisrael divided into 12 ranks. So that's where the word shevet comes, like a stick is in a straight line. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So last week, perhaps I need to clarify, having gone through the sizes of matzah, it worked out that for the first Casas, even if you have 2 kasesim, so you're going to have a quarter from the top matzah, a quarter from the middle matzah. And then you're going to have a quarter for Korech and a quarter for afikomen. So it sounded like you can manage with 1 matzah. And of course, we break the middle matzah and we take from the top matzah. But why do we have to break the 3rd matzah? There seems to be enough surplus in the top and middle matzah that you shouldn't need to break the 3rd matzah. So it's interesting. In the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't emphasize to break the 3rd matzah. In the Mechaber, in the Shulchan Aruch, it says in the beginning of Tov Ayin Hey, he says you break the 3rd matzah. It is curious why the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention it, but this is where you have from the in the Seder, he does say to break the 3rd matzah, and this is from a sefer called Pardes L'Rashi. So you have in Rishonim, they say, why do you break the 3rd matzah for Korech? And the answer is l'kai mitzvah b'shloshton, to perform a mitzvah with all 3 matzahs. Okay, so we do break the 3rd matzah and we use that for Korech. Okay, but perhaps that's just to clarify the point which is raised before. You'll use all 3 matzahs, not just 1 matzah. Okay, now one of our regular listeners asked about, he actually works in retail, kosher retail, and apparently there is an oil which is a sunflower oil, which is available with a kosher lePesach. So is sunflower oil allowed on Pesach? Is that chumrah? And if someone was not using sunflower oil till now, may they now switch to start using sunflower oil? Do they have to do hatosh nedarim? Apparently, it's quite a bit cheaper than the almond oil or the other oils which are available. Okay, so we're going into the topic of Kitniyos, which is a minig ashkenaz. So we have them from the top. It's from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in Tov Nun Gimel. Talks about which grains are good for Pesach. Then it talks about not using kitniyos. We don't use rice, millet, beans, lentils. Then b'shumshimin and other means of kitniyos. We don't use those even on the last day of Pesach. And that he explains is because of, and what I've said many times, it's not as if the Rabbonim decided one morning we're going to have to make a new chumrah this year. It didn't work that way. It was having observed mistakes happening, they felt the need they had to do something to stop this mistake happening again and again. So they apparently, going back 500 years, how far back I don't know, the Takon of Kitniyos, perhaps a bit more, they noticed there were people who were not knowledgeable, and they saw if Yenta is making a lentil soup, so Tvosha would make a barley soup, because these foods, the lentils and the barley and grains are kind of used in a similar way, and therefore they saw that this is a recurring mistake, and therefore they instituted we don't use pulses, legumes, whatever you call them, over Pesach. Now, the word shumshimin is actually ambiguous. That's the crucial word, the second line in the first quote, because the word shumshimin can be translated as sunflower, and the sunflower is that, first of all, it's got its resemblance to what we think of a sun, it looks like, but it follows the sun. It's a heliotrope, whatever you pronounce it, and so it's got to do with the word shemesh. But there's another word, the word shumshimin, if you spell it with a sin, sumsumin, if you pronounce it with a sin, it's actually sesame. And the poskim who say that it should be read sumsumin, and it is referring to sesame being kitniyos. Sunflower seeds, you don't use them in flour to make flour. You don't cook them as making soups, etc. So it's a bit of a stretch to say that sunflower seeds should be included in the issur of Kitniyos. It says shumshimin, understand that shumshimin means sesame. Apparently, that is the position of Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who is quoted in, there is a sefer called Melamed Lohoyel, a Yekish sefer, going back from 150 years ago perhaps, and he takes the view that really it's sesame which is the issue. It's not a problem with sunflower seeds, but certainly the Hungarian and Polish Rabbonim translated that they said it means sunflower seeds should not be used on Pesach. So that brings us back to the question you have in the shop. You have the fact that there is sunflower oil kosher lePesach. So there are ashkenaz Rabbonim who don't have a problem with that. Now, if someone wants to go along with that, but till now they were being machmir not to use it, and they want to switch, I think they should do hatosh nedarim. What they do, the poskim also point out to an interesting thing which the Alter Rebbe writes. The Alter Rebbe says, Kitniyos is only a problem im noflu al, see the second quote. It's only if they have become saturated with water. And if it had been grain, it would be a problem of chametz. In other words, if it's dry, it shouldn't be a problem of Kitniyos. And then he says you're also allowed to use Kitniyos oil for lighting. And you don't have to worry if a bit of the oil will drip into the food, because even if it does, it's going to be bottled barev, etc. The whole thing of Kitniyos is a chumrah, and therefore we don't have to go overboard about it. I want to just before finishing off this point, make it very clear that there's no issur of owning Kitniyos over Pesach. So if you have a cat or a bird which feeds on Kitniyos, that's okay to feed them Kitniyos over Pesach, so long as they're not ashkenazim. That would be okay. And to have, I had a very interesting question this week, that someone is going around the Ukraine giving out matzah, at the same time giving out rice and oil to people who otherwise are very restricted in what food is available. So there is and they were asking a question whether they can give out the rice and the oil, which is not kosher lePesach, can they give it out before Pesach? And I felt very strongly that it's not a problem at all. First of all, because as I just said, there's no problem to possess Kitniyos. And in addition, in the circumstances which are going on over there in these small places in Ukraine, it might be even grounds to say that they should be allowed to use the rice, etc., because of the sakana situation, such a shortage of food. But what I did say is that the fellow who's going around to these houses and bringing them the matzah and these provisions should also bring a shtar mechiras chometz, a document that people could sell their chometz. And if they know what that's all about, they will be able to sell their chometz and avoid using it over Pesach. Let's just take a look at your chats. If there is such a chashash, allowing Kitniyos to be kept does not really help. Right. The point is that we're talking about a chashash and issur, not even issur rabbanon, but issur of takonas rabboni ashkenaz, and there's a limit of how far they are mechuyev to go. You don't make mishmeres to mishmeres. You don't with the issur rabbanon. You don't have to protect the protection. There is an opinion that the oil is far removed enough from the Kitniyos that it doesn't apply. That's true. There are those who are bechala mekel on Kitniyos oil, but that's interesting because here the Alter Rebbe says you can use it for lighting. Obviously, he doesn't allow you to use it for cooking. Right, someone's pointing out that formula for baby bottle is also Kitniyos, true. And if you do use formula, so then you'd wash it up separately. Don't wash it up with the regular Pesach stuff. I may have mentioned this last year, since we're on the topic of Kitniyos, that there is a letter of the Rebbe from 1951, Tafshin Yud Aleph, approximately. The letter is addressed to the Rebbe's cousin, Reb Issa Kluvgant, and he says, it's a short one, Anash mishtamshim ben notola be Pesach. So what is notola? Apparently, notola is a cottonseed oil. And here there is a machloikus between the later of Padve, Reb Heinrich Padve. He took the view that cottonseed oil, although cottonseed itself is not edible, still the cottonseed oil is subject to Kitniyos, the issur of Kitniyos. Other rabbonim, particularly in America, there's I think the Debritzina, some rabbonim felt no, if it's not edible, then there should not be an issur Kitniyos on the oil from an inedible food. If the whole thing is you might use the food, as you just pointed out, there shouldn't be such an issue. As a result, there are certain products which are produced with good hechsherim in America, which would not be allowed in England with a Tazria approval, because they use something like cottonseed oil, which Tazria will say is not fit for Pesach, and the American Rabbanon will say it is okay. Right, let's move on. Someone's asking about kashering a cooker for Pesach, but I'm not ready to talk about that without having prepared. Okay, let's move on. Okay, something which is very, I'm surprised it wasn't put in the luach, and that is not in the Chabad luach, and not in the Union, the Kadasya luach. There's no mention about this. And let's explain something. The top quote is from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, I think it's in Tov Lamed, and the bottom quote is from the journal His Kashrus. So there is a mitzvah in the Torah to give truma to a kohen, a matzah to a Levi, and so on. And there's matzah sheni should be taken to Yerushalayim, and matzah anash should be given to the poor. So this is done in two stages. First of all, there's hafroshas truma and matzah, and the second part is giving it over. Unfortunately, because we're tomei and the food is tomei, so we don't give the truma to the kohen. But back in the day when it was available for the kohen to eat, so there could be a situation where a person will put aside truma and matzah and just hoard it, and it's just sitting in his barn or wherever, and grain can store for years. I don't know what the quality is, but you can store for years. And the Torah says no. At the end of 3 years, so you have to take out, you have to dispose of all your maestras, no hoarding more than 3 years. So at the end of 3 years, so you have to give the maestr, the truma to the kohen, and the maestr to the Levi, and the matzah sheni should have been taken to Yerushalayim. You cannot hold on to it longer than 3 years. When does the 3 years end? So you have the first 3 years of the Shemitah. So that season, that stretch finishes by the Pesach of the 4th year. Then you've got year 4, 5, and 6 of the Shemitah. So those 3 years, they finish at Pesach of the 7th year. So if you had a hoard of trumas and maestras, so that by Pesach of the 4th year and by Pesach of the 7th year, you'd have a duty to dispose of that, to give it to the appropriate people, etc. The Alter Rebbe here is talking about the minhag of reading the Haftorah on Shabbos HaGodel, to read the Haftorah of the Orva, because in that chapter in Novi it talks about bringing the maestras. Here there's an interesting minhag which I don't want to discuss now because I haven't prepared it. There is a different minhag of when we do the of Orva only when Shabbos HaGodel is Erev Shabbos, is Erev Yom Tov. Some people do the Orva Shabbos HaGodel when it's earlier in further away from Pesach either, but that's a separate issue. Meanwhile, the Alter Rebbe is saying, reading the Haftarah of the Orva. So I'm reading from the text now, the top line. Shebe'erev Pesach, huzman habiur. That is the time of disposal of your trumas and maestras. The hainu, i.e., shebe'erev Pesach shashona revius shebeshmita, ve'erev Pesach shashona shvius shebeshmita. Erev Pesach of the 4th year of the 7-year cycle, and the 7th of the 7-year cycle, a person is obliged to remove from his home all the maestras he's set aside from his harvest for the past 3 years of the Shemitah. Okay, and then he has in brackets that the Zman HaBiur is not, some say it's not the beginning of Pesach, not Erev Yom Tov Harishon, it's Erev Yom Tov Achron. That's indeed the halacha, that the Zman HaBiur is the last day of Chol Hamoed. But nevertheless, the minhag is to say the Haftarah at the beginning, Erev Pesach. Fine, that's about the Haftarah. But coming back to what's relevant to us is, do we have matir in our houses? So if you do buy occasionally Israeli produce, and you do the trumas and maestras, so part of that procedure is that you have a coin and designated, and every time you do hafroshas trumas and maestras, so a pruta of that coin is now occupied, so to speak, with the kedusha of matzah sheni. Instead of taking it to Yerushalayim, so we exchange it for a coin. So we've got this coin, and if you live in Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be a more frequent occurrence that you have occasion to do trumas and maestras and have a matzah sheni. Now you've got this coin. So what do you do with this coin? So now we go down to the second quote, and that is, as you can see, it's from the Hiskashrus journal. It's from Yud Nisan, which is it's a Chol Hamoed. Actually, I think it should be Chof, whatever. Doesn't matter. Second column. If you have a coin which you have used for redeeming neder avaya, the 4th year of a tree of a fruit tree, or Master Sheni. So you've got now this coin, it could be worth £1, £2, let's say, if you've done it many times. So then you can exchange it for a smaller coin. You can say, well, this pound is now exchanged for a 5 agura, for a pruta. But the main thing which is relevant to us, via calculus hamatbeya, you should then ruin the coin. So if you do have, and I actually do have one here stuck on the wall somewhere. So Erev Pesach, or Erev, the last days of Pesach, I'm going to have to take that coin and ruin it, the hammer or something, and then dispose of it. So that's the Biur Maasros. If anyone out there is listening and you do have a Maaseh Sheni coin, then make sure you dispose of it before the end of Yom Tov. Now, yes, someone is pointing out that they've signed up to a system in Gateshead who does Trumas and Maasros, and they have the coin. And actually, Rabbi Ginsburg here in the Hiskashros, he's also saying, instead of having your own coin, be a member of a Keren HaMaasros. I know that it exists. Personally, I've never fully understood how it works, so I haven't joined this Keren HaMaasros. But if you are, yes, then you won't have the fun of taking a hammer and smashing a coin. Okay, let's move on. So here, someone was in conversation with me this week. She suffers from some kind of stomach problem, and irregular wheat causes her havoc, and even oat matzahs apparently cause her also a lot of pain. And she found there's these gluten-free matzahs, and it says on the packet, if you can read, it says here, not a replacement for matzah at the Seder. So she wanted to understand, perhaps in her condition, whether there's a heter for her to use this kind of matzah for the Seder. So I'm not going to the business of machine matzah, hand matzah. That's we're going a level further than that, or beyond that. So what you have here at the beginning of Tofnun Gimel, as you can see, which type of matzahs are going to be suitable for Pesach. So it says very clearly it has to be one of the 5 types of grain, which wheat, barley, kusmin, spelt, and shiur is oats, and shifon is rye. So we've got these 5 grains, and the matzah is only going to be valid as for the mitzvah if it's one of those 5 grains. If it's made from rice, from millet, or from beans, etc., you're not yotze in the mitzvah. So I did do a little bit of research about these gluten-free matzahs. Apparently they're made from tapioca, perhaps some potato starch. So the brachas are definitely shahakal, and they are not, you're not yotze in the mitzvah. I did say to the young lady, I said that, listen, or perhaps the first night, if you can manage just a quarter of a matzah, of an oat matzah, and perhaps if you chew it well, listen, as I said to her, it depends on how much you're ready to suffer in order to do a mitzvah min Torah. That's with all the sympathy, but that's as much as I can do. Okay, yes, let's go on to the next point. Okay, bit of a surprise. Someone he had some pain in his eyes, and you're asking, what do you do, coming back to the question about the Rabbi Klein is asking, what do you do with a coin? So he said you should spoil that coin. I'm going to flash back just to, if you can see here, he says for you calculate some atbeya. So you'd have to smash it and make it unusable. All right, let's come back to our to the heat pads. So a person was having pain in their eyes, and the optician apparently recommended they get a heat pad, and you put it in the microwave, and then put it on your face, I guess, and it helps soothe the pain. But then somehow the pad tore a little bit afterwards. Oh, no, they had already, this is they had put it in the Pesach microwave, and then it tears, and then they see they've got grains in it. So, is the microwave usable for Pesach? So, the main thing I put it on is that apparently a lot of people have these pads, and lechatchila for sure, you should not keep them in your possession over Pesach. And in other words, they should be included in the mechiras chametz. That's why I put it on the shiur on the screen. About the microwave, it's before Pesach. I think the grain is dry, so I don't know how much. And if it's dry, I don't know whether it's chametz in the first place. But fine, I felt that it's before Pesach. I think they should kasher the microwave with boiling water, and that would be adequate. If it'd be chametz mamish, I wouldn't be so easygoing. But you're talking here about a remote chashash. It's inside a bag, and it's dry, and who knows what's ever become chametz in the first place. So before Pesach, one can be much more lenient than if it had happened during Pesach, obviously. To explain that before Pesach, we can rely on the concept of bittul b'shishim. During Pesach, there's no such thing as bittul b'shishim of chametz. The term is it's also b'mashu. Even the tiniest amount doesn't become negligible. So on Pesach, that wouldn't be passed. Okay. Okay. So here is a question, not an unrelated, not a Pesach-related question. Fellow's got a couple of few children, and they are lebedik achevra, and thinking about summer with the hot weather, about buying these vests, which have got for tzitzis. The children should wear tzitzis, but they can put these tzitzis vests. Apparently, they're quite popular, and so are we okay with that? So here, the quote you have here from the Alter Rebbe's Seder. So he says, "Kol ish yirei Hashem b'chovas mitzvah yisov." A person who's God-fearing and desires to do the mitzvahs, the kai mitzvahs tzitzis kol hayom, to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis throughout the day, unanimously. Sorach lizor b'talos cotton shalonu. We have the concept of talis cotton, which means this thing, the square, which has got a hole in the middle. That's what talis cotton shalonu is, distinct from the talis, which is a square of cloth which you wrap around your shoulders. That the talis cotton should be totally open on both sides. And it goes further, not even to use buttons, hooks, to hold the two sides of the talis cotton together. And Kosher came with tefillah, and certainly should not be sewn. Even from the upper half, it's chayv b'tzitzis, but you're saying that really the talis cotton should be a totally open square rectangle of cloth. There shouldn't be sleeves added to the talis cotton. So certainly on a lechatchila level, these t-shirt tzitzis are something which we wouldn't go for. In addition, bichlal, there's hadrim would wear woolen tzitzis, but woolen garment. But even if you are using cotton, but to have these t-shirt tzitzis, it's better than nothing. Definitely, if someone would otherwise not wear tzitzis at all, but it isn't l'koliyah. It's not, that doesn't fit the bill totally. But then the other question was, he says, okay, let's drop that. But what about wearing? If the children have to wear a vest and the tzitzis, and then presumably a shirt on top of it, or could they wear the tzitzis directly on the skin, then have to just a shirt on top? So this is what we have here. We've got there's a difference between the derech hanigla and derech hakabbalah, and the Arizal is the one who's quoted of wearing the tzitzis under the garment. Not the top garment, rather it's more underneath. But he would be particular to have it on top of a undershirt. Here, this is a quote from the Kitniyos. This is a Sichir Chelik Lamed Gimel, Parshas Shlach, talking about whether it's important for the tzitzis of the talis cotton to be sticking out, to be visible. But meanwhile, he's got this quote from Pri Etz Chaim. In Akis Arizal is written, the Arizal would wear the tal's cotton as an undergarment, al hachaluk, on top of the vest. So there is this idea that the tzitzis, the tal's cotton, shouldn't be mamish on your skin; it should be on top of a vest. Right. So this is that's from a quote from Arizal, and this is also for the Sefer Pisket Shuvas, where he's bringing that are those who wear the tal's cotton on top of the vest. And then in the notes here, he has he's saying there isn't a problem to wear it directly on the skin, and Rav Shlomo Zalman is saying it's not a busy mitzvah. But then he quotes from this Rov of Anash who say that it is considered disgrace to wear the tal's cotton directly on the skin. And especially if the cloth of the tal's cotton is a kind of absorbent material like a vest. So then it would be a disgrace for the mitzvah, and he's questioning it. So, okay, so we've got here back and forth, how strong is it that the tal's cotton shouldn't be worn straight on the skin? What I would say, if they're little children and they are finding it difficult to wear several layers, and they're comfortable to wear the tzitzis directly on the skin, if it's extremely hot, uncomfortable otherwise, I think there's room to be makel. What I would like to say once I'm talking about this is that typically the tzitzis have got very long shoulder bands, which then makes that you've got this, they look very shlochy when the kids don't have them tucked in because they're far too long for them. And they don't need to be, the shoulder straps could be made much shorter, and that would make the tal's cotton more neat and more wearable. So it's not a big deal to do. Don't cut if you want to do it, don't cut the shoulder straps, just fold them over and sew them that way, and leave enough space for the head to get in and out. That would be fine. Okay, and also leave it long enough that they could take them out for davening and etc., to make a bracha on them, etc. Okay, so last week we had this discussion about having the Seder, so having the Seder the second night, stretching on that even the first Casas matzah is eaten after Matzos. And I read last week a piece from the Hayom Yom. Here is from Likutei Diburim. I'm not sure which was written first, but he's writing, the lashon here is the Beis Harav, the first night, they would start right after Ma'ariv, and they wouldn't stretch out the Seder in order to manage to eat the Fikoim before Matzos. Unlike this, the second night, that they would make the Seder b'shor mu'cheres balayla. So my impression is that they even started the Seder late, which is not actually in the Hayom Yom. It said they started the Seder at 9 p.m. I don't know what the timing was in Russia at that time of the year, but here he's saying that it looks like they're saying that even started the Seder quite late, and then they would discuss the Haggadah at length, and as a result, the Afikoim, and as I suggested last week, even the first Casas matzah probably ended up after Matzos. And still, they would obviously make a bracha, otherwise they wouldn't be mevato or such a thing. I want to show you, I have this book. Someone dropped it through my door. It's by someone called Menachem Ze'ev Frank, and he's again explored the shiurim of matzah. So I'm just going through this again a little bit. He may be even a little bit more lenient than what we had last week. And on the right of the screen, so that's the shiur for Casas from Torah. He says it weighs 15 grams. This is according to Reb Chaim Noah. So that's for the Casas. If you're only having one Casas for the mitzvah in Torah, so that's enough for one Casas. And if you're having, as we discussed last week, now for Casas de Rabbonon, he's got this smaller one, which he says it weighs 9.5 grams. And if you're having two Casas, one from the top matzah, one from the middle matzah, each one could be this size. And of course, this is a little bit reduced, but this is an A4. The original is an A4 size, so you can get the proportions. Yeah, if you print this, if you want me, anyone wants me to send this by email, I can send it to you. But yeah, so the quantities, if you're going to have for Casas the Rabbonon, that's the size which you're looking at, that's a fair bit smaller than a quarter of matzah, which we discussed last week. So yeah, so that's, I hope will be helpful for those who have a bit of a struggle with coping with the large amounts of matzah. He also has here, whilst I'm already at it, he has also about the shiur for lettuce. An A4 size piece of lettuce would be enough for a Casas for tomorrow. Right. I don't know whether someone's asking where you can buy this book. I don't know. I can tell you that it is available from someone called M. Frank in Helene 22, Antwerpen. And I'll tell you the telephone number is 32 3 230 8075. So that's M. Frank in Helene 22 in Antwerp. So you might, if you wanted to get hold of him, you can buy it. There's no email, so that's why I'm not telling you the email address. Right, let's go on. So just to make up the Minion, someone asked a question about using chafing dishes for serving on Shabbos for the Amaratzim like me. So here we have what is a chafing dish? So at the bottom, you have here a burner, or two burners in this case. You have here a bowl, and that bowl that is filled with water and becomes hot water. And then you have another tray where you put in vegetables, etc. And you've got a lid. And when it comes serving time, so these will be like for a buffet arrangement. Comes serving time, you lift the lid, whoever wishes, and they'll serve themselves. And so they're asking, can they use this on Shabbos for Friday night? Obviously, it means that the burners are lit before Shabbos. And the question is, are you allowed to serve food from such a keli, from such a piece of equipment? I mean, we may have gone through this before. The answer is basically yes, unless it's a liquid. And they're not usually used for liquid, but if it was used for a liquid, then that would not be okay. So let's read that in Shulchan Aruch. This is towards the end of Siman Shin Yud Ches. It talks here about ha'il posel hakdero, a pot which is taken away, which is boiling, and it's
often have liquid. Could be meatballs and sauce, not always.
So if it's taken off the fire, so then he talks about using a ladle to take stuff out. So if it's not fully cooked, then you shouldn't be ladling out, because stirring is bishul. If the food is fully cooked and it's taken off the fire, then you are allowed to stir the pot. And some say you shouldn't stir a pot, even if it's off the fire. But he says, that's all said as far as stirring for stirring. But to use a ladle, you don't have to be machmir if it's fully cooked and it's not on the fire. But for food which is on the fire, then you wouldn't be allowed to. That's what's relevant to us. Food which is on the fire, you wouldn't be allowed to ladle out, because that in effect is a form of stirring. So when it's something like vegetables, schnitzels, or things like that, where there's no stirring involved, I don't see a problem. Even if it's something which is, I don't know, which has got a lot of sauce, but it's not as if you're stirring the sauce. You're taking out solids which are in sauce. I still don't see there a problem of Vegas. If it's something like a soup, then you're using a ladle. Then if it's sitting on the fire, then that would not be okay. All right, that is as much as we have for today. Someone asked me a question about doing laundry during Chol HaMoed if they're traveling, and don't have enough clothes with them, but that will, I think I'm going to leave that for next week. Someone is asking, you will need to leave the fire the entire Shabbos then. The answer is that this burner, coming back, those burners, they are made of some kind of wax or solid paraffin. They last for about 4 hours. After that, they go out by themselves. So there's no fire burning for the rest of Shabbos. Right. Okay. So I'm going to stop here and wish you all a good Shabbos. And Bez Hashem, thank you for joining us. Bez Hashem will same time next week in Gesundheit. So Kol Tov and good Shabbos.